I would start with a question about Britain, because you had elections. Now there is after 14 years of Tory rule, there is a new government. How do you see the performance of the new government? How do you see Britain now?
Britain now is disappointing, I'd say. The British public took a great leap in 2016 in saying that we didn't want to be part of the European Union. Unfortunately, we had a political class that would not agree to the beliefs of the people. And as a result, we've had almost a decade now of serious turmoil. And the Conservative government that was in charge for almost 14 years was inept, not very conservative, and the British public voted them out last year. The Starmer government has, as I see it, has no particular vision for the country, doesn't particularly understand the country, and is going to flail. And it has 4 more years to flail like a dying beast.
And do you think that it can mean also a change on the right, that the Tories are losing their leading role on the right side, conservative side of the political spectrum in Britain, and they can be replaced by the Reform Party, and Nigel Farage could be the big winner after this term?
Well, Farage has a lot of virtues. He, the old Isaiah Berlin thing about the hedgehog and the fox, you know, the fox knows many things, the hedgehog knows one important thing. Farage knew one important thing, EU, which was not really about the EU, it was about an issue of sovereignty. We had in Britain a tumultuous period for decades, which was, it came down to a central thing, which is who governs us? Are we in charge? Are we the electorate in charge? Who can we vote for? How can we vote them out? And so on. This was not an issue just of the EU, it was an issue of sovereignty. And Farage knew, had known for 30 years, that after Maastricht, Britain had a sovereignty question. And in 2016, we voted to reassert our sovereignty. Now, the politicians obviously bungled a lot of what came afterwards. But that's a very, it's an interesting thing in a person if they're right on the major thing. And Farage was right on the major thing. We wanted to know that when we went to the ballot box, the people we voted for, we could vote in, we could vote out. And he was right on that. He has to develop a wider, I would say, a wider set of ideas than he currently has. But he's speaking to a very interested public, because what you might call the mono party of the notion that effectively whoever we vote for, it comes out the same way. You know, he can run against the mono party, and there are several things that are very major in that. The most important is migration. It doesn't matter who you vote for, the migration always continues, and it always goes up. I think that Nigel has a great opportunity if he has a vision of how to reverse that. Not just to stop it, but how to reverse it. But to do that, he has to get a wider pool of talent, I think, than he currently has.
And do you think that he was right with Brexit? Was it a good decision? How would you summarize it after some years? What is the experience? Was it a mistake, or it had been better to stay in the EU, or it was the proper decision for Britain and now it's going on a much smoother way?
I think it was a proper decision because of this issue of sovereignty. It's key to the minds of many of us that the public have the right, and this was a left-wing view as well as a right-wing view in the past. It was key that when we go to the polls, we can vote for the people we want to be in power, and crucially, that we can vote out the people we don't want to be in power. So very important, just sovereignty. When we were in the EU, we could vote in elections nationally, but there was this other layer above us, above the people. And we didn't know who they were. We had no ability to vote for them. We couldn't get them out. I remember once being in a panel in Brussels and discovering that in the next door room, the EU was appointing a new foreign minister, a woman of fantastic lack of ability called Catherine Ashton. No one in Britain had ever heard of her. She had no track record or anything. And she became the EU foreign minister. But she wasn't even famous in her own household. And suddenly this person is representing Europe on the world stage. We didn't like that in Britain. And so there are countries, I recognize, and we're sitting in one of them, which accept the bargain of Brussels. We in Britain were not willing to accept that bargain. I think that was the right decision, but it's an interesting, formative, educating experience to see what happens when the public votes for something and the political class will not embed the vote. And that's what we had. And so
but it's happening all over Europe. Look on Germany, Austria, a lot of France, Romania, where you have this experience that there are elections, there are parties who are the Freedom's Party, the Freedom Party in Austria, or the AfD, which is meant to be banned from the political landscape, and a lot of politicians and media people are thinking about this and writing about this and pushing this forward, and NGOs. There was this interesting election in Romania when you had a candidate who was then basically closed out from the race. Then Le Pen can't run for presidency as it seems now. So it's not just a British phenomenon, but it's all over Europe phenomenon.
That's true. I think something we're all struggling from is that we have political classes across Europe who are suspicious of the public. And what I mean by that is that they don't think the public choose wisely. And that's been one of the post-Brexit problems, was this political class that thinks, we, the public, made the wrong decision and therefore the public needs replacing or correcting. I think that the fastest way to answer that is to say, if the public wants something, the best way for it to be tried out is at the ballot box, obviously. And political parties should try to embed their policies. And if they work, they work. If they don't work, they don't work. But there seems to be across Europe, in Britain and in Europe, and you could argue in America, this feeling that among some people in political elites that the public don't really know what they're doing, and that the political elite does know what they're doing, and therefore you effectively the old Brecht joke, you replace the public. I would say that it's crucial that people understand who think like that. They understand that what would come after that is much, much worse than anything they've currently envisioned. You've got to answer main public concerns in a reasonable way at the ballot box, or unreasonable people will come along. So in Germany, France, everywhere, they have these ideas of what their nemesis are. But I think they're underestimating what happens if they don't listen to what is real public concern.
If I look on the EU and if I see the reaction of the Brazilian elite on this, then the answer is not going to the direction you described now. Their answer is basically ever closer union. So the big polarizing question is United States of Europe versus Europe of the nation states.
Yes.
And especially after Brexit, and especially after COVID, after the war situation, and so on, and so on, and so on, the tendency, what I see, is that the answer to this is an ever closer union, more centralizing.
Yes.
If we more centralize, then we can basically, what is happening on a national level and what is happening on in an election on a national level is getting less and less important. And that's the solution for this phenomenon that, okay, there are the people who are going to a wrong direction. And then that's the answer of, but on the other hand, with their answer, they are pushing the people, the nations of Europe, or a big part of the nations, towards parties, towards politicians who are new, who are giving a different directions, and who are opposing this whole stuff, what we call EU, Brussels, Strasbourg, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously happening. It comes back to a set of key questions. I would say again that the central one is sovereignty, is knowing who you're voting for. If a Hungarian voter goes to the polls, they can vote for Orbán or they can vote against him or whatever, but you know who's in charge. It's a crucial thing with the EU has always been this issue of sovereignty. Is it the case that when a voter in Hungary or France or whatever goes to the polls that they can vote out people who have not succeeded or not? And the answer for many years has been that although national elections are important, there is this super class of politicians, Ursula von der Leyen, Cathy Ashton, endless numbers of non-entities who weirdly still govern and have significant and important roles. I think that this subverts democracy in a very crucial way. And the sort of super governing class in Europe has visibly failed. I think much of it comes down to, I mean, as I say, the fundamental issue is sovereignty. But much of it also comes down to the questions that the electorate would like to have addressed, which that governing class will not address. Principally, in my view, as you know, is migration, because the EU governing class will not address, and you might say cannot address, this fundamental issue of the 21st century, which is that with the ease of movement of the modern era and the number of people who want to come to Europe and the number of people who Europe could absorb being so wildly different, the EU political class just cannot do what the publics of Europe keep asking, which is just slow it down or stop it. They can't do it. And this causes a deadly, in my view, sort of struggle. Because after all, you know, who makes up your population is not a small question. It may be the biggest question of all.
What do you think what the Hungarian voters get if they vote for Orbán, and what if they vote for someone else, for the opposition?
Well, I suppose the problem for Orbán and Fidesz is that they've been in power for so long that it's quite easy to see how an electorate might say, we assume this is the norm, and we can try something new. And you know, that's within that's the right of the Hungarian people to do. I think that I think it's very hard for incumbent parties, when they've been in power for as long as Fidesz have, to show that actually what they've managed to achieve in office is not the norm, but is unusual. And that's obviously going to be the one of the questions that the Hungarian people will have to answer next year. But there's definitely a challenge for Fidesz in that, because it's inevitable after a certain number of years that people want to throw out incumbents, you know, try something new and all that sort of thing. It's a sort of habit of politics and democratic politics that happens. So I suppose the challenge for Fidesz will be showing that what the party has managed to achieve in office is unusual and would not be continued by an alternative. But
what would be your advice to Fidesz? How could they show this, or what should be done in the campaign?
I'm not a campaigner, but I mean, I suppose the only thing I would say is that they would have to show what I just described, which is that for instance, things like the migration policies of the Hungarian government are wildly against the norm in the EU and would not be replicated by all other parties. And therefore you have to show that the status quo is needs to be actively sustained, that it isn't a force of nature that will just keep rolling. I suppose that would be the one main thing.
How is the outside view or the outside perspective about Hungary? You travel a lot. You spent, there was a year when you spent 1 month in Budapest.
Yes, during lockdown.
During lockdown. How is the outside view about Hungary, about Viktor Orbán? You spend a lot of time, of course, in the UK, but in the United States and elsewhere. How do you give this outside perspective for the Hungarian people about their country?
Well, I think it's interesting because so much rotates around American politics. And American politics has shifted, as you've noticed.
Yeah.
And there was a time when Hungary was, and Viktor Orbán was sort of litmus test, really. I mean, it was like you as a country were taking unbelievable fire. I mean, you know, how many? 10 million people?
Yeah, 9.5, 6.
It's straight. I mean, this is a sort of, you know, a state within the United States. But there was so much sort of focus on Hungary from, you know, New York Times, Financial Times, the sort of international media. There was so much focus on Hungary. I mean, it was almost unsustainable in a way. Like, why should a country of 10
Why
million...
was this focus?
Well, Hungary did some things that were viewed as wrong by much the international media. Migration was the most obvious one. I said that one of the things historians will say about the decade before ours is what a curious thing it is that Angela Merkel will continue to be celebrated for doing the wrong thing, and Viktor Orbán will continue to be berated for doing the right thing. And that's an odd thing. You might say that the situation that Hungary found itself in was, yes, a sort of lightning rod for the issues of the era, migration, sovereignty, and other issues. Nevertheless, Hungary suffered from this unbelievable focus on it as the outlier within the EU, and you might say within the Western democracies. And then when Donald Trump returned to the White House, I think Hungary internationally could breathe again. Democrats, when they're in power in Washington, regard Viktor Orbán and Hungary as being a sort of, what would you say, a bad child, and that needs correcting. And Donald Trump has would be very positive about Viktor Orbán's policies, recognizes some kinship in lots of ways. And so I think that pressure has come off, is what I'd say internationally, that the pressure of being the bad child in the class, the naughty child. I think that pressure has come off slightly with the return of Donald Trump to the White House.
You've described Hungary as a kind of laboratory of the West many years ago. Is it still valid? Is it a laboratory for a conservative way of how you govern, how you build state?
If I said it, then of course it's still valid. No, of course. I mean, this was what, when I wrote my book, The Strange Death of Europe, about the 2015 crisis, and indeed the crisis of some decades in Europe. He said there are certain key moments in modern European histories, and that was one of them. And the question that was posed that year, and which the Orbán government answered, was, are we in Europe a place where anyone in the world can move in? Indeed, perhaps everyone in the world can move in and call it home. And the answer from Berlin and Brussels was yes, yes. And the answer in Budapest was no. And I think Budapest was right. I don't think Europe can be the home for anyone in the world who wants to call it home, just in population numbers, welfare numbers, integration numbers. It just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And it was a very, very important thing that this country that we're sitting in said no, and that its leadership said no. As I say, the key thing will be whether or not in the years to come people recognize that that was a brave and important political decision, or whether they think it was effectively inevitable, that as it were anyone in charge would have done that. It's not the case, as you and I know. That required a lot of political will in 2015.
You write about, as you mentioned, in Strange Death of Europe. What do you think? How are the developments since your book? Did Europe recognize this? Did the Western world recognize this problem? And they tried to. Can you turn this process? Did Europe try to turn this process? How do you evaluate the situation now?
Well, I warned in that book of what would happen if things continued on their trajectory, and it was widely read and widely ignored as an argument. And that's, I think, to say that I'm disappointed about that is to vastly understate issues. Western Europe has a fantastic number of challenges now. And I suppose the central challenge is the population are changing. And everyone in Western Europe did two things simultaneously. They underestimated the number of people who wanted to come, and they overestimated their ability to absorb them. And, you know, Prime Minister Starmer recently gave a speech in which he said that Britain was at risk of becoming a country of strangers. He was immediately berated by the left of his party and others for this rather banal and obvious observation. It's way too late to describe it as that. I think future historians will look back on these decades of Western Europe and just marvel at what politicians were willing to put the general public through. I mean, the most obvious one, let me do it at the easiest level, which is without any, just take the welfare state. You cannot have a welfare state that exists, that survives, if you have large numbers of people who've never put into it, but are taking out of it. And it's almost 15 years ago now when Angela Merkel said, I think to the Financial Times, she said, modern Europe is 12.5% of the world's population. I'm approximating it, don't hold me to these figures, but she said something like, 12.5% of the world's population, 25% of global GDP, and 50% of welfare spending. And she said then, things are going to have to change to keep this going. Nothing has changed. And, you know, a country like Britain is taking in thousands of people all the time, illegally, who will never put back into the system what they've taken out in terms of welfare spending. Take out all the identity questions, the integration questions and everything else. How is that sustainable? How can a country, I mean, how can a country keep its pension system going when you have hundreds of thousands of people who will never be a net financial gain to the country? And the answer is we'll see. But to my mind, that's catastrophically short-term thinking. And I'm sorry that people didn't listen when I warned.
And isn't it the success of a lot of parties in France, the Freedoms Party in Austria, AFD? You can see that they are trying to give an answer, and that's why Europe's political landscape, that it's not completely changed. But if you compare how it looked like 2008, 2009, 2010, you didn't have in Italy such a government. You
That's
have
true.
Meloni now. You didn't have. You always had Le Pen, and then in the second round, 70-30. One of the Le Pens is losing. Now it's much closer. In Germany, it was unimaginable that a party which is outside of the media spectrum, political landscape is now on 25% of the polls.
Yeah.
And we can go on and on and on. In Portugal, we could see the latest elections that you have in Sweden, a party, the Democratic Party, which is so. It's these changes a reaction of the people, I think, and this reaction. What I don't understand is you warned. You sold your book in millions of copies, so to say. They don't listen, but why don't they listen to the people? When even just as a communication, if they don't mean it by heart, why don't they try to give some kind of answer to masses, to the question of masses of people in Europe? Why is this ignorance? And why do they give the political landscape to parties that they don't want to give the political landscape?
Because some problems are hard, and the instinct in politics is always to avoid hard problems. It's easier to push off certain problems for your successors to deal with. Look at what happened in America with the Biden administration, the Trump administration. The Biden administration allowed open borders. Millions and millions of people came into the United States, undocumented. And it's harder to keep them out or to return them than it is to let them in. And that is the modern European conundrum, which is it's very easy to do a Merkel. It's hard to reverse it. So people put off for their successors problems they can't answer themselves. I would say that there's one other thing, which is that to a great extent, modern European politics is still stuck in the 20th century, in that a lot of politicians, and I say this just, this is the fairest evaluation I can make of some of the people I'm critical of. The fairest evaluation you can make is they fear the public because they fear a return of the 20th century. Ethno-nationalism, for instance. If you look at the way in which governments, Germany, France, Britain, they respond to public outcry, the tendency is to attack the public. Say you can't trust the public. So, for instance, 3 girls were stabbed to death by a maniac from Rwanda in a northern city, Southport, last year. The government can do nothing to stop that, but what it can do is crack down on the public who are unhappy about it. And that's what we see time and time again. And I think there are lots of reasons for that, some technical, but the deepest reason is a fear of the public, a distrust of the public. And you see, those of us who think differently on this know that the British public are not Nazis. They're not racists, fascists, they're decent, good people. And they don't like losing their country. But the political class, left, right, and most of the right, doesn't really have that trust in the people. They don't have that faith in the people. And we see that in the way in which they govern. They fear the public at some level. And I think they misread us. But this is leftover business in the 20th century. And deadly, of course, because if you don't trust the public, if you don't believe the demos has a kind of wisdom, at the very least you should listen to it, what are you left with? Technocracy. But this is a deadly problem for Europe. It's not quite as bad in the United States because the United States didn't have the 20th century that we did in Europe, but there is a certain element of it of, you can't trust the public, but it's less. There's still a sort of sense in America that the decent American taxpayer has value and virtue. In Europe, Britain, Europe, I'm not sure that the political class really believes that. I think they're suspicious of us. They worry about us, they fear us. They think we have the wrong views, wrong tendencies, nasty attitudes.
Mm. What do you think about the deal between Donald Trump and Ursula von der Leyen recently? Is it beneficial for the US? Is it beneficial for the European people? Is it beneficial for both? Is it a good deal?
Well, a trade deal between the US and the EU is good news. I'm not sure that people understand that at the root of it is a commitment to massive EU investment in the US. That's very good for President Trump, and he's doing what he should do.
It was for me very interesting that the Financial Times published several articles criticizing Ursula von der Leyen, that it's not, and you could read even in the British press, but the European press as well, that the winner is Donald Trump, and it's not.
Yes.
It's not very often, and it's not likely that those journalists write Donald Trump is the winner. It's very rare that I read such sentences.
Yes. The Financial Times admitted that. Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, I mean, President Trump is representing the American people, and he wants to get a good deal for the American people. It always goes back to this issue of sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Does Ursula von der Leyen represent the European people? Nominally, yes. Practically, no. Is she able to get the best deal for the European public? I suppose she tries. But she's obviously been outsmarted by the American president. She seemed to me, well, she was rushed into it, obviously. She had to run over to Scotland to meet President Trump in between rounds of golf and beg for a deal. And he got the better of her. But he's a very good negotiator, and she's not. We'll see what happens with that. But a lot of this comes back to this problem that Europe is declining economically, declining internationally in its heft. And I see almost no European leaders who recognize that fact. And then even fewer that would like to reverse it. It's like a managed decline is the view of most, if not all, European leaders. Managed decline. Where is the European vision for, a sort of make America great again? Where is that in Europe? Who are the leaders who would say our best days are ahead of us? They don't exist. They say our best days are obviously behind us, and so let's see what we can do in the time we have. This is a crisis of Europe.
What do you think about the first months of Donald Trump? Were you for Donald Trump?
Well,
did you support his election, or were you happy when he was elected? And how would you judge his first steps nationally? How do you see it within the US and internationally about the Middle East, about the war, Russia, Ukraine, about the trade question, which is a big question with Europe, with China, with India recently?
Yeah. Well, America was slightly in that position I just described as Europe as being in. America was slightly in that position of managed decline in the Biden years. No one really knew who was running the country. And there were not cabinet meetings from one year to the next. And that was deeply troubling. There seemed to be no agenda. President Trump arrived in office for his second term with a huge agenda. I mean, really running from the start, which is not just unusual for him, but is unusual for any presidency, because the nature of American politics is that you spend years campaigning to get into office. If you get into office, you need a break. Then you have an inauguration, and then you sort of slowly get going. President Trump realized, having done this before, that you can't afford any downtime like that. And so from the first day in office, really, he has had a very clear agenda, which he's seeing through. I think it's, whatever criticisms anyone has, I think it's energizing that this is the case. There are lots of criticisms that, people can make, but you know what Trump wants to do, partly because he says it. And sometimes people say to me, how do you know the president's going to do this, that, or the other? And I say, he doesn't keep anything a secret. If he says he's going to do something, he does it.
He said he can change the deep state, or he can... Probably it was one of the big experiences of his first term that...
Yes.
You are in power, but... The power under you is very strong and can defeat you. He recognized it, and I think why he started so quickly, why he was so powerful, and why he was basically the first day with the big pen signing the different documents, is showing that I arrived, and now I change it. Now I have more people, I'm not alone, and my 20.
Yes. Well that's...
Can he do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely he can. Then that's the big difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2. Trump 1, I think, I'm not being unfair in saying that it was rather a surprise to everyone that he won. He would, I think, deny that.
Have you been were you surprised?
Trump 1?
Yeah.
I think the world was surprised. Yes, I didn't think he could pull it. I didn't have a strong view either way, but I was surprised that he pulled it off. I watched for 4 years as he walked into every imaginable headwind and was very impressed that he managed to survive that. A lesser leader would have been blown over by any one of those winds that blew. But Trump, too, he knows what was coming at him. And I think also at another level, it's, that one of the advantages he has in this term is that what you describe as the deep state, but almost the state, has to a great extent reconciled itself with the fact that this has happened. It's one of the things that was very important about his mandate last year was that, remember 2016, his opponents did what they did with George W. Bush and constantly implied that he was an illegitimate president, or said he was an illegitimate president. And they fought and fought. They did Russia. They did all these claims. The election last year was so clear that those people had to pass through the denial stage of their grief. And to a great extent they have. And you can see that in DC, that they've accepted that he is the president. And that was not the case in Trump 1. This is, you know, and this is why, you know, of all the challenges he has, one of the most important things for Trump is he has to show that he can be successful in the policies that he's promised the American people. And I think so far he's done very well on that. I mean, for instance, he had to show that he could actually do deportations of violent illegals. And he's doing it. If he'd have failed, or if he does fail, that's deadly, because America would slide into the hopelessness that much of Europe is in. But if he shows that it can work, not only does it give hope for the American people, but it would give hope, I think, for the European people as well, that we can make decisions at the ballot box, and our leaders will act on them, and that our future success could occur.
So it's a hope for democracy?
I think so. I remember when Matteo Salvini was foreign minister, interior minister in Italy some years ago. And I said, you know, him in a meeting, that it was striking to me that the policy he was running on was the deportation of illegals in Italy. And I think at that point it was about 1 million people. It's always 1 million, by the way. The numbers are all crooked. But, and I remember saying, but how are you going to do it? And I think Europeans have had this fatalistic view about the migration issues and other things for a long time. But Donald Trump has actually done it. He's started to do it. He's not done it entirely. But now, if you can reverse a bad policy like the open borders policy, then it gives hope to everyone. And if you can show that you can, you know, it goes back to this thing that can tomorrow be better than today? Can we say our best days are ahead of us? In America, Donald Trump has been able to say that. And a lot of the American people want that. They want America's best days to be ahead of them. And I think a great challenge for us in Europe is, can anyone really say that with a straight face? Or will we keep having political leaders who just want to manage our decline? I'd like to see our best days ahead of us. I'd like to see us thrive in Europe. I say us, Britain, Europe. I'd like to see us thrive. I think we have wonderful countries, wonderful democracies, wonderful culture, the best culture. And if we could actually have politicians who believe in making tomorrow better for us in Europe, in a practical sense, in a financial sense, in a cultural sense, this would be amazing. But we have to get rid of the people who think merely that their job is to cope with the European people, to tolerate us.
In Hungary, especially in the conservative spectrum, there was a discussion about during the Biden administration, but under Obama and Hillary Clinton and so on, that is there an influence from outside on our sovereignty, on our politics? The conservative politicians and commentators said yes, there is an influence, not just from Open Society, Soros NGOs, but other NGOs as well, media as well. And in that sense, it was and then the opposition and the left-wing media said, no, it's just fake news. And it was a big, somehow, I think we believed in this. We saw the signs, there were proof. But with USAID, and that people could see it, that just, okay, the US embassy is somehow against the Hungarian government, for example. But it is clearly financing media, NGOs, political change. And it's not just for Hungary. It's not true for Hungary. You can see the same in Germany.
Sure.
You can see the same in the Middle East. You can see the same in South America. And this bringing, it's not bringing democracy. It's basically bringing your ideological views to these people. And that it's stopped. It's probably a hope. Do you think that it will make a difference in the future so that the US stop this and the US is concentrating on itself? As I see, Trump is, of course, he's interested and he's happy that if other governments say similar things than himself.
Well, I'm all for America arguing for itself and defending its values and explaining why its values work. In the late 20th century, this was a great virtue of America, and indeed I'd say has been since the founding. But it took its own side in an argument. The curiosity of recent years has been that America, principally under the Democrats, has not taken its own side in an argument. In other words, the soft power of America has effectively been against American power. That the USAID world has sort of subverted the ideas of America and in some ways waged war on them. So I like the idea, and I'm in favor of the idea of America arguing for itself on the world stage, as long as it is the America of the founders and of the best of America. I think the curiosity of recent years has been that the worst of America has argued for America. The sort of crazy gender ideology and the race obsession and all of this. So, if America is explaining itself, arguing for itself as the world's leading democracy, as a beacon of liberty and much more, then great. The problem has been that the people arguing for it from America have been arguing for this weird version of America that's obsessed with transing your children and, race has to do with everything, and you've got to litigate slavery as if it stopped yesterday. That's just a horrible version of America. And but yes, this country and this neighborhood benefited enormously in the last century from America arguing America's best version of itself. And if you look even at just specific institutions, look at something like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. During the Cold War, this was a terrific engine of American power and American influence, and it was a voice for people living under tyranny to understand there was another way of life. And then by the last decade or so, this same institution becomes this just bizarre left-wing American thing, and that's such a shame, because my view is that there are still many, many people around the world who could do with the American idea of liberty. Mm-hmm. The Iranian people could do with the American idea of liberty. And they could do with the inspiration of the Founding Fathers. And they could do with the inspiration of the American story. And what they don't need is a weird, gender, race-obsessed, self-hating ideology that says, well, we're all bad, So institution by institution, a lot has gone rotten in America, as a lot has gone rotten in Europe. But the foundational ideal and the foundational impetus for that ideal in America remains undimmed. And the great question for us in Europe is, can we have an undimmed vision of our future that is equally positive? And I really hope so. I really hope so, because this city, this civilization, this culture is unparalleled.
In Hungary, the main topic of June was the Pride, and the Pride was
The gay pride parade.
great.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was not allowed in Budapest to do it, and it was organized and did it, and there was a huge mass of people there. What is your opinion about this? What do you think about the Pride parade?
Well, being gay myself. I'm for just equality. That's always been my view, which is that just equality is the only thing. Not special rights, but just equal rights. And I've always said that pride is the wrong way to approach the issue of equality, because it suggests that you should, well, several things, by the way. One is, notice in scripture, pride is never used as a good idea. There's a reason why the scriptures tell us, pride cometh before a fall. And there's a reason why it's regarded as being one of the sins, because, well, lots of reasons. But so I've always had a problem with the framing of it like that. I think that it's very important to explain the case for equal rights, liberty, respect, in gay rights as with racial rights, women's rights. I think it's very, very important just to understand the case for equality. My beef with the pride framing has always been that it suggests something else. And what, unfortunately, to the concern of many gay people, unfortunately what's happened in recent years has been that the equality argument has turned into this weird sort of political project. And the political project includes the trans thing, includes the claim that, gender is a spectrum, and that, there's no such thing as gender, or, sometimes we wake up feeling a bit feminine and then we're masculine by lunch, and all this nonsense. I mean, this is just crazy talk. And unfortunately, I think to the great detriment of gay people, the pride argument has allowed itself to be taken to its most illogical extremes, so that reasonable people have reasonable concerns about it. But if, the crucial thing in the gay rights argument was always, we're not different, we're the same. And the pride argument is, we are different. Mm-hmm. And that is just,
that's very interesting.
I'm amazed always that hijacking occurred. But I mean, it's not my main beat, but I'm just stunned. If you look at writers like Bruce Bauer, Andrew Sullivan and others, when they were arguing in America in the 1990s for equal rights for gays, it was on the basis that, we're the same as everyone else. And then these sort of purple-haired lunatics come along 30 years later and they say, no, we're... there was this girl who was in Eurovision, this Irish witch, and I say that for once, literally. There's this Irish witch, she's a self-confessed witch, who was had horns and things, and she was in Eurovision against this beautiful Israeli girl, and this Irish girl had horns, and she was she had studs and piercings through every imaginable place, and then some, and she was like, we're queer, we're coming for you, sort of thing. And she's a heterosexual woman with a boyfriend. Like, how are you queer? What? You're just a subversive revolutionary. Like, keep that away from equality and gay rights. Like, I don't want to see some Irish witch anti-Semite pretending to speak for gay people. These are appalling people. But it has to be divorced. So if the argument is for equality, the right to love who you love, and so on, absolutely I'm there. If the aim is we're going to have a revolution and all like put horns on and say we're queer whilst with our heterosexual lover, no. Like, keep that a million miles away. And I hope that the government here in Hungary and the people here in Hungary are wise enough to understand the difference between these things. Equality is one thing, and a revolutionary gender ideology with Marxism and a bit of green and a bit of Hamas and everything thrown in, no, totally different. Mm-hmm. So I march with the first and never with the second.
Israel, you were recently heavily attacked about your opinion about the Middle East, about Israel. I saw that you argued for Israel's right to exist. You agree?
Not a controversial thing.
Sorry?
Not a controversial thing.
Do you think? I agree with you, but you how you described the Irish witch is she would argue with you, and a lot of it's for example in Hungary there is the Sziget Festival, which is probably the largest festival in Europe.
It was a music festival.
The music festival, which,
like Glastonbury.
Yeah, and they invited a Northern Irish rap band.
Oh, this one, Kneecap.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it was a huge discussion in Hungary, for example, that is it possible to invite... First, I think it's a cultural question in Hungary. We don't have a big Muslim minority. It's under 1% or less. We have a heritage of the 20th century in Europe that you previously also described. Is it good if we bring this new kind of anti-Semitism, new kind of discussion from the Middle East to Hungary? Is it good if we allow such a band, this Kneecap band, to perform in Budapest or not? Finally, the Hungarian government decided, and there was a big public debate about this, but the Sziget Festival wanted to keep this band. And then the government decided that they don't allow to perform an anti-Semitic band in Budapest.
So they were banned?
They are now banned, so they can't come. They can't enter the territory of Hungary for 2 years.
Interesting.
So I see this, even in Hungary, where we don't, it's far away from us, so to say. But we have the history, and it's a discussion. It was for weeks of discussion in the newspapers, on television, people for it, against it, and across the political landscape. So there were leftist intellectuals who said, no, you can't do that. There were other intellectuals, leftist intellectuals, who said, yeah, you have to invite it, you have to allow them free speech, and it's fine if they perform and they sing like this. I see this as a big discussion in Europe. I agree with you that Israel is a bastion of the Western world in the Middle East, but neither in the US or in Europe or in the UK. It's not a very obvious yes or no question.
Well, you know where this appalling Irish band Kneecap, you know the name, where it comes from?
No.
Kneecapping was something that the Provisional IRA, the Republican terrorist group, used to do if they wanted to punish somebody without killing them. And what they would do was that they would take a gun and they'd put it to your knee and they'd shoot you through the knee so that you couldn't walk again. It was known as kneecapping. So this charming Irish band have named themselves after this terrorist trait. I have no concern about whether Kneecap should perform or not. They should be free to do their illiterate rapping wherever they like. And I would never want to hear them. But people should just know the context of them. These are just terrorist supporters, terrorist lovers. I have no doubt that in a free and open discussion between those of us who are against shooting people in the kneecaps and those who are for it, that those of us who are against it will win. But we should have that out in public, and we should debate it. And as for the Irish obsession with Israel, which is part of the underlying thing of your question, I have to slightly subdue my anti-Irish bigotries, joking, of course, but I mean, I want to hear Ireland talk about Israel. Probably last of all things in this life. Ireland, never forget, during the 20th century, decided that in the war against Nazi fascism that it should be neutral. And it forbade its ports even being used by the Royal Navy in the fight against Adolf Hitler. And many thousands of British servicemen went to the bottom of the ocean because of the Irish people and the Irish government's obscene love of Hitler. I will not hear in the 21st century the descendants of the Hitler lovers in Ireland telling me about the Jewish state's right to exist. No. No. I mean, I'd rather hear Hamas sing than hear Irish politicians talking about Jews. They have no damn right. They've done nothing in their history that gives them the right to tell the Jewish people what they should do in their historic homeland. And there are a few thousand Jews left in Ireland. And this, by the way, was a very, very distinguished community in the past. Some great, great people came from Ireland in the Jewish community. And now it's a few thousand people. And this stupid government in Ireland makes the Jewish question one of the questions of the era. They can't do anything in Ireland. They're a pathetic chattel state of the EU, like a begging bowl to Brussels. And they dare to say who they think should have a state or not in the Middle East. They should sort their own damn house out. I feel rather strongly about the Irish question.
I see that, but it's an interesting view, and I think for Hungarians, until this Kneecap question arose, it was not obvious. But now, for example, how do you describe this?
They're terrorist supporters. Kneecap and groups, they are terrorist supporters. They support the provisional IRA. They literally name themselves against the provisional IRA who put bombs on trains as I was growing up in London, who blew up pubs in Birmingham, who shot people through the back of the head for being Protestant. They name themselves after these terrorists. Of course they support Hamas. Of course they do. These people love terrorism. All I would say is that the Hungarian people, like everyone else, has to know who we're dealing with. Some people love death. Kneecap have named themselves after a death cult and support another death cult. That's all we need to know. And then you and I and the Hungarian people and others can decide whether or not we want to go to a concert where these sick, sick people are performing their unlistenable to music. I won't be buying a ticket.
My last question is, what would be your advice to the Hungarian voters for the next year? if you would be a Hungarian voter, what would be your consideration before going to the voting polls? What should be?
It's not my place to tell people how to vote. I just say, choose wisely. Choose wisely.
Douglas Murray, thank you for the interview. Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure.